And today the topic is codependency a part of sex addiction? So that's what we're going to be talking about. And by the way, I just want to say that all of these podcasts are not scripted. So when you are hearing the podcast, this is happening live with our collective experience, our collective intelligence, and so it's you're hearing it as it comes to our minds.
I'm laughing because I'm thinking if anybody's listened to our podcast and they thought we scripted these out,
Sorry.
I
and
think our
Sorry.
writers are pretty poor.
we have to do a much better job of scripting because
But thank you for saying it, Wendy.
Uh,
Codependence, what do you guys think?
yes,
Who's done? Dan?
Well,
first,
are we talking? Are we talking in addiction? So sex addiction? Are we talking the addict? We're talking the betrayed partner. I mean, those are two completely different topics. We're talking
let's
about.
let's start with the addict.
yeah.
Let's start with what is codependency?
Oh, you took
Doing
Dan's
this.
thunder.
No, I'm cueing Dan.
So yeah, so the original thought is
I left you hanging, Jeannie.
is codependency
Let it
a part
dangle
of
there.
sex addiction?
Sorry, Wendy, we're goofy today.
No, it's all good. So right, so for the addict is so um so when we're treating sex addiction, there's a lot of protocols, there's a lot of specifics on the way we treat this, um, and so as I've been working with addicts, as we get the sex addiction in remission, I'm finding that there are other things that creep up, and so the question is, as I wanted to have a discussion with all of you, what you thought of this idea of codependency being a part of it, and if so, if it is, why, how, and do we treat that? How do we treat that?
Well, the def
Dan, Dan's face. For those of
I'm just, I'm going to just
I'm
hop
out.
in. The definition I'm finding is excessive emotional or psychological reliance on a partner.
Ugh, that still doesn't feel like it defines it to me.
I,
Excessive emotional and psychological dependence on a partner. That's the definition. Is that what you
reliance.
said? Reliance.
Yeah. I mean, that's the dictionary definition. I mean, how do we see it in the office? How do we see it in the people that wander in to seek services from us? I need other people to like me. I need to make sure that I bend my persona to make sure that other people uh, think me. I just did some work with some guys in a group around identity, and there was an interesting definition that was in this book we're reading. You, I am not what I think I am. I am what I think you think I am.
Yeah,
And
I
so
got you.
codependency is like, I am trying to manage what you think I am and make sure you like me and you stay here and you don't leave me and that everything is okay. And I am doing everything I can to manage that.
Yeah, I feel like there's this focus on the other. My needs need to get met through the other. So if you're okay, I'm okay. So I'm going to focus so much on managing the other person and making that person, I don't know, have that person's experience be positive enough so that I'm okay. Like that, I don't know. It's like I'm losing myself in the other.
There's also a piece in there of, I don't want to upset you. So rather than asking for what I want, I end up trying to manipulate you to give me what I want, but without asking for it because I'm afraid you'll not give it to me or you'll think negatively of me.
and or
Jeannie,
could it
what's
that I'm
well,
just yeah, Jeannie's thinking,
Jeannie's
but
got a look on her face.
or could it also be I'm not going to ask for my needs to be met, or I'm going to minimalize my needs because the fear of if I really do ask, you're going to get angry or you're just going to leave.
Yeah, because I
I
think
think
that's the
it
core, isn't
goes,
it? Isn't it that it's a depth of like, if I really have needs and I ask for those needs, I don't believe that anyone. It's so terrifying to ask for that, like showing up as a full authentic person. So I can't trust that I can be my full self in a relationship and ask for my needs and have them be met. Probably because of earlier trauma experiences that said you don't have needs, or when you do express yourself, they didn't get met. or they were minimized or abused.
So, Jeannie, your poker face is failing. You have thoughts?
I have so many thoughts on this. So in the way I think of codependency, it's really going back to the growing up years. What is modeled, what kind of environment. And again, I do really see it as survival mechanisms, because to know what one's needs are is a very, in my mind, high level thing. And if you're growing up in an environment that is chaotic or threatening or abusive or not, you don't develop the thought about what are my needs. And it's not necessarily to manipulate to get my needs met. But it is because I'm trying to keep things safe, keep things nice, keep things easygoing in the house. And so the person who has this, I think of it more of as an attachment style or communication style. I don't want to rock the boat because I'm scared of what will happen when the boat rocks for whatever reason. So therefore, someone who may demonstrate more codependency flavors, tendencies is what I say, could minimize or not even know what their needs are, because there's a bit accidentally self-sacrificing to make sure the other person is safe or okay in the world. So it is a denying of self, but I don't know that so much of the time it's on a conscious level.
Oh,
I
I
think
think
a lot
it's
of people get into codependency work and they go, I'm reading this list and oh my gosh, look, there I am. But I do think it's a reaction mechanism for survival, and usually when one is young and occurring in close relationships.
Do you think it's different than when they're young, how the coping as when someone's young versus now when they become an adult and how it shows up? You think it's all unconscious even as an adult?
Do I think it's conscious?
Yeah, conscious or unconscious.
Oh, well, I think sometimes both, either. It depends on how much learning or awareness or that this person has gotten into therapy or read books. I mean, codependency is not something we teach in high schools, for example, you know? And so I think they're operating in a way that they're just trying to make it through, not knowing that a lot of those features or ways of communicating are more often classified as codependency.
So,
Yeah.
and I liked what Jeannie, what happened before we started recording, I believe, is what's the difference between codependency and taking care of somebody?
Exactly.
Because
Exactly.
it can look right. So on the outside, it can look, no, I'm just caring, I'm just being loving, I'm just, attending to my daughter or my husband or my wife or, and I don't want her to or him to feel bad, or I don't, and so is there also a quality of, I'm just thinking about this, is to determine, is it a feeling of doing too much? Like when it gets codependent, does it have a feeling of grasping or overextending, where true caring and love has a different dynamic? It has there's this feeling of giving, but uh it's interesting, right? I'm trying to feel this through.
But
Go
oh,
ahead.
sorry. Well,
I'm in with
Yeah.
you. I'm in with you, Wendy, because I
yeah.
would say the depleting.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
if you're depleting yourself to make sure they're okay, then maybe we need to talk about this
Right.
this concept codependency. Because absolutely, there's so many people in the world who are loving, generous, caring people who are very giving to others. That's wonderful. And if you're depleting yourself or depriving yourself or overextending yourself in the goal to be of service to others, perhaps it's not in your best interest.
I was thinking that too, kind of who's this for? And I don't know that question someone might know, but if I'm caring and generous, hopefully it's for the other person. I think codependency, it's I need you to be okay so that I can be okay. And I think what I've seen too, Jeannie, that's what I was just thinking. When I feel like it's gone to the point where it's something to look at, like the giving, where it feels codependent, it's I see either someone being exhausted, they're really depleted and tapped out. Now, someone might be caring for someone who's sick or chronically ill or all that. So that I'm not saying that's codependent either. So just be careful. But like, I think also when someone gets resentful or feels like a martyr, that's also, and they may not vocalize like, I need a break, or, you know, when I see those kind of things, that feels like, okay, now you're not taking care of yourself, and it's self depleting
Mhm.
for sake of caring for the other. I think that's when I feel like, okay, it's something we got to look at.
I think
Mhm.
it also can, sometimes it's easy to, easy might be not the right word, but you can also spot it from the other side. If I'm interacting with somebody who's codependent, they may be doing really nice things. It just feels slimy. It feels like there's strings attached. If I don't appreciate them the right way, that it doesn't feel as clean. Or it just feels like they're always doing stuff, showing up all the time without really giving me the opportunity to sort of step in and do it. Or uh,
Mhm.
what do you guys? I mean, when there's the internal experience of codependency when you're interacting with somebody who has that codependent flavor.
I'm gonna say a lot of, I would say it's interesting. I never would have put the adjective of slimy. I would say so many folks are championed when they're behaving in a codependent way. These are the people who, yes, I can bring cupcakes to the school party. Yes, I can do all those things. Yes, I can volunteer here. Sure, I can take care of this. Sure, I can take, I mean, they are generally very loved because they're saying yes too often. And so here are all these people who are, they're all getting their needs met. But the person who's doing the giving just continues to give. And then sometimes, it's a bit of a burnout and a crash or resentments,
Or maybe
um,
it becomes someone, they become passive or passive aggressive, or
passive
you know,
aggressive.
it seeps out some other way potentially.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Well, and we talked about the person getting depleted. But I think there's also th that others get neglected, and I don't know why this came to mind, but Walt Disney, right, was giving, giving, giving to all these children and making, Disneyland and going bankrupt 8 times or 7 times, however. And I believe his children were like, yeah, he was a great dad to everybody else, but to us, we didn't have a dad.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so,
Although workaholic comes up for me right there. Is that codependent?
well, or narcissism. I don't know what it is. Is it
Right.
codependency? Is it narcissism? Is it workaholism?
So
Also,
let's
is this a, just thinking like the cultural piece of this too? I mean, that's easy to say from a
Mhm.
Western individualistic kind of mindset, but you know, I know plenty of other cultures would you don't just think of yourself and care for yourself. You think of your family, your extended family, your immediate family, your community. Like, how does that all play into this too?
So that's a good question.
Absolutely.
In collectivistic
Right.
society, codependency still exists.
Well, is it codependency if it's culturally appropriate?
Right.
And that is the prize, that is the norm, is that I'm thinking of some folks that to be collective is highly honorable. To think of yourself first is very selfish. And this idea like of self-care, for example, like that's a very sort of American verbiage. But in other cultures, we wouldn't have that necessarily.
But the distinction, I'm thinking of it now, is one person is not giving to another. In collective
Mm,
cultures, everyone works
everybody.
together at
Mm-hmm.
the same time.
Mm-hmm.
A
Mm-hmm.
very different dynamic.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So let's get back to where we started, and let me play devil's advocate.
Oh boy.
So addicts out there, narcissistic, self-centered,
Oh, I was
focused,
thinking that too. Yeah.
oh, acting out without thinking about how it's going to impact other people at all. How on earth can you possibly think that codependency could possibly be attached to those people?
Because I believe that the addiction starts with addicts overdoing. So that they are um, very involved with work, perhaps very involved with family, very involved with Now I don't know the quality, right? We could talk about the quality of those interactions, but that they extend a lot to a lot of different things. And I believe that that overextension then leads to anger and resentment because they're not doing self-care. They're not doing authentic self-care at all. And then and that's learned behavior that then gets acted out in the addiction. Then the addiction, sorry, not acted out, sorry. So the addiction is, okay, this piece is for me. I feel that I'm giving so
Entitled.
much. And so I'm angry about it. This piece I'm taking for myself. That's the way
I hear you. I don't disagree. I was thinking, I don't put codependency and addiction right at the front together. I think where I see it more is when someone has been working and they're in sobriety and they're working their recovery and they're uncovering, how did I create this? How did this become a maladaptive coping skill over a serious amount of time? And when they're doing that work, I think that's when we start to uncover maybe some codependent, again, survival mechanisms learned in their younger years. But when I would say someone is very active in addiction, because I think addiction is very self-serving and self-preserving, that I don't know that the codependency is as glaring.
Right.
But once we deal with the addiction and we've got some good management going on and healthy behavior, and we start to dig, that's when I see it like, oh, there's that part. Okay, how are we going to work with this? How are we going to change the way we speak and assert ourselves?
Yeah, I would agree.
I still think it can show up in active addiction too, not just, I mean, I think it's always present. It might look a lot different and it might not be, but I'm thinking of someone who, I mean, I think of if I'm acting out sexually, I'm instead of turning to my intimate relationship to meet my intimate needs and be a full authentic self there, I'm hiding parts of myself. I'm not showing up as a full self in that relationship. And I'm kind of outsourcing parts of myself other ways instead of just showing up and saying, here's me in the relationship, here's my wants and needs, and you know, like in a healthy way. And I guess that I don't know how, maybe a little stretch for codependency, but I feel like if I'm not showing up as a full person in my relationship. If I'm acting out sexually, I might show up as a jerk and I might not look like how we talked about classic codependency, but I'm also not giving my partner the opportunity to meet or not meet my emotional needs, physical, non-sexual needs, like these other, you know, again, I think just showing up as a whole human being and in a relationship.
So are you drawing the connection then in your mind of codependency is, how do I say, because I'm not showing up with my full self, because I'm not sharing my needs, wants, fears, etc., with my primary partner, and I'm out there acting out this way, you're saying because of that commonality, therefore you see that as codependent?
I think there are some pieces of that, because I think someone who is codependent also is not going to show up authentically and express their needs. They're gonna try to get their needs met out externally. And I think that's what narcissistic people do. That's what addicts do, is instead of trying to meet my own needs or have this, you know, I'm turning all these other external fuel supplies to try to meet my needs externally. So it might be a stretch, but I think there's some commonalities for sure.
Well, I'm just curious. So Dan, I'm just curious. So my question, like, because you're using the term full self. And so I just, so for definition, right, is being in your full self, knowing how you're feeling, knowing needs you have, and then what's the definition of full self?
Well, I'm not hiding significant parts of myself from my partner. So my behaviors, that's not just the sexual behaviors. I mean, you know, and I think that's a good point. How much is to my awareness? Maybe that's what you're saying, Jeannie. Some of this stuff, it's not really until someone gets in recovery that they realize what their true needs are, or even their feelings, or what's going on, or the trauma that underlies all this stuff. So I don't know that they have to have that awareness, but I feel like what's common for every true addict that I've worked with is there's parts of themselves they show other people, the world, their people around them, and there's parts of themselves that they hide based on negative core beliefs of feeling defective, unlovable, unworthy. bad, all these things like a fraud, less than. So I think even the most narcissistic kind of jerk person probably has that core. They're just so defended from it themselves. So they have to present a positive exterior to themselves and everyone else, right? That's, to me, that's the core of narcissism. They just
Mhm.
might not be aware of it.
Mhm. Mhm.
I think about um, like addicts. One of the, I mean, like what you're talking about, one of the sort of basic tenets that I often see with addicts is that addicts tend to put on sort of a persona, or I sometimes talk about it as put on the veneer. I want to manage the view, the perception that people have of me. I want to control what people think about me. And in 12 steps, you'll hear the phrase "scratch an addict, find the codependent." And I think that you're right that on the surface, it doesn't always look like codependency, but underneath, much of what addiction is about is control. And when that comes to relationships and other people, addicts often compulsively try to control other people, control the outcomes, control the interactions, control how they're seen, control how the other person feels or thinks about them, what they want to say about them. And so there's all this underlying attempt to manage the persona, manage how people see you, manage the relationships, control all that kind of stuff. And that attempt to control it is, I think, in many ways sort of central to what codependency is. I'm doing all these nice things because I'm trying to control how other people think and feel and relate to me. And when we talk about recovery, the serenity prayer is all about letting go of control. Grant me the serenity to accept the things I can't change, courage to change the things I can, wisdom to know the difference. Let go of the control, let go of that codependence flavor, and start stepping into life being fully known and with authenticity and trust.
So I think that coming to a conclusion here, that maybe we all agree that codependency is a part of sex addiction. Is that where we're at?
I'm gonna put
So, so okay, Jeannie's a maybe. So, thank you all for listening to our conversation today. Please subscribe if you haven't already. And if you liked us, go ahead and like on the different social media platforms. And also, if you have questions for us or you want us to address a specific topic, you can email us. And that email address is conversations.sar@gmail.com. Be well, and we'll see you next time.